Who knows about the orange hats and the yellow hats? Okay, a few of you don't, very quickly. Black hats, white hats, we're in the middle. We here are the blue hats, we're right up against the white hats, does that make sense? We're awake and we are ready to fight and win, does that make sense? Right, now, the green hats are just to the right of us. They're awake but they don't know what the hell to do next. They're the people we speak to, that's where we recruit. Does that make sense? Because they want this finished just like we do. To the right of them, let's go from the black. You have the black hats and the red hats. The red hats are the mindless drones that'll do whatever they're told. And they might be senior constables, part of the Masonic filth. They might be judges, generals, politicians, who knows. But they will just do what they're told to do, and they keep doing it. Now what's going to shift them out of their little red hat area? When the black hats get arrested. So when the black hats, you see them doing the perp walk, nice orange jumpsuit, crew cut, the red hats start to squeal and they'll start telling on their other red hat mates. And one will squeal on 5 and those squeal on another 5, so you get 25. You see how it works? And bit by bit by bit, the red hat mechanism by which all of this delivered starts to be dismantled. Now that's not our job, but you've got to know what our allies are up to. And that's happening right now as we speak. So just rest assured, our job is not to storm Parliament. Our job is not to disarm the police. Our job is to turn up, and that's what we've done. But the red hats are being taken care of. Next, we've got the orange hats. Now, who are the orange hats? The orange hats are your classic normies. They watch the news, and they believe it. Because if Koshi says it, it must be true. And they watch the ABC and they think Ida Buttrose and the ABC is the bastion of freedom and democracy in this country. What they don't realise is they're supporting a pedophile protecting organisation. But the normies are watching that. They're the orange hats. And they're the people you'll try to explain it to, and you will go hoarse trying to get through to great Aunt Maud, who still thinks that Bob Menzies is the Prime Minister and he's doing a bang-up job. What's going to shift the orange hats into the green hat area? Evidence of crime. Evidence of crime. When they see that, oh, the Minister for X was arrested today for horrible crimes. And they'll go, oh, that's terrible, but it must be true because Peter Credle, Andrew Bolt, Paul Murray, Alan Jones and the ABC told me it was true, so that's why they believe it. The reason those same faces are still telling the news is the people trust them. And so the new narrative, the truth, has to come through the old faces. Does that make sense? Don't worry, the media types who are guilty of crimes will be held to account, but they're just being found out at the moment. Because we know the COVID nonsense, which has robbed our wealth, maimed our children, and killed our friends. There's acres of evidence out there that this stuff is bad, correct? Blind man could find it in a second. But the media, for some reason, hasn't, because that's the wall that has to crack. And if you look carefully, you will see the cracks in the wall forming, because the stories are starting to come out. And so the normies will actually swing around and say, did you know that this stuff apparently is not good for you? And you'll hand them a piece of tinfoil for their head. So they're the orange hats. They need to see the normie media report a whole new narrative, and it's happening. So once again, this should be encouraging you. The red hats are being arrested. The normies are finding out from the controlled media what's happening. Who's next? The yellow hats. Now this is a tough group. The yellow hats don't care. They don't care how many babies die as a result of this. They don't care how many football players die on the field of play. All they want to do is go to work, get paid, pay their mortgage, and watch Netflix and hide. They don't want to know the truth. No. And nothing you can say will shift them. They are so terrified of leaving their safe space. The only thing that moves them is if there is danger behind them and they have to move forward. Now, the first piece of news that actually might do that has just come out. Because you can tell them all sorts of things, but they don't care. But now, the truth that they contain AIDS is going to terrify everybody, as it should. And so the yellow hats are going to turn around and say, what? Now, if you look at the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration website, and all the paperwork associated with it, they knew this was coming. It's all set up. And they even have the briefing packs and the ads in the airport. And there's a picture of a dad and a mum and a child, a happy heterosexual family. And it implies that heterosexual married men with kids apparently have sex with other men. Now, I've been around a few years, and I've never felt the desire, no matter how pissed I got. So they are feeding the narrative. So when the wife gets this letter say your husband has contracted AIDS, they are preloading the normies out there to believe that he's been having a bit on the side with his mate Jack. That's how crooked these buggers are. We know it's a lie. They have intentionally put the AIDS element of the AIDS into the alleged in order to reduce our capacity to fight the disease. Now, the good news is, before you panic, there are ways to get around it. High volumes of micronutrients, vitamins and minerals give the body its chance to fight back against all disease. But our bodies have progressively over the years been degraded in their capacity. The food we've been given has been not the best on the planet. It's been bad for us. It affects our gut. And as you know, gut health is highly correlated with your capacity to fight disease. So we've got a crook gut, we can't fight disease, and we're getting sick with everything. So those that have been maimed, and this is the good news, and it's important it gets out, that the people out there that have been maimed by these, it's not a death sentence. There are ways around it. Some will die. That's just the facts. Some will pass. Large numbers will pass. But many, many, many people who have been maimed by it, once we get big pharma out of the way and we go back to natural medicines and get the body to do what it does best, which is protect itself against infection, we can bring these people back from wherever they are to good, rude health. How does that sound? But this AIDS thing is important because it's going to wake up the yellow hats, the normies, because all of a sudden the fear of what's behind them will force them forward and say, hang on a minute. And that's all we need them to say. Just hang on a minute. Just hang on a minute. Now, you may or may not know this. There's a raft of legislation coming in at state and federal level. Apparently it's due at the end of the month, and there's lots of stories going around, so it may or may not be exactly true, but here's close enough to it. They are getting ready to lock you down even harder. That's why we were told by a bunch of dishonest crooks some time ago, everyone go home. They'll be fine. Come back on the 29th. Well, guess when this legislation is due to be passed? 28th. Now, if you're disappointed in people because you trusted them, this is the part of the growing up process. The bad guys are revealing themselves. Just take note and walk away from them. Make up your own mind. You're all intelligent, you're capable of thinking for yourselves, and that's the big mistake the politicians don't make. They think you're stupid. They don't think you have the wit to understand what's going on. They think you are so compliant. This is where they messed up. And this is the globalists more than these guys, because these guys couldn't find a keg of beer in a brewery. I mean, they're just too stupid. But the globalists that planned this, just so you're aware, they literally thought if they just impose this on us, we just follow. They misread the Australian character. Just because we're slow to anger doesn't mean we don't like a good fight. So this complacency that they saw around the rest of the planet, they thought Australians are complacent and docile. Far from it. We just don't like being disturbed by horse shit. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. We don't like being interfered with. Just leave us alone. What has John Wilson said? He's a member of the Leave Me the Hell Alone party. And so they thought they could impose this upon us, and we were just willingly and quietly accept it all, but we didn't. Just because we're slow to fight doesn't mean we don't like a good stoush, and we do. And what's happening is this: they've pushed us, and we've taken it, and we've taken it. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Year 3, you know what? I've had a gutful. You're either a crook or incompetent, but either way, we're not doing this anymore. And so the fact that you are here, still pressing, is going to shift these yellow hats and orange hats towards the green hat, and that's where we recruit them. Not to a party, but to a movement, to an ideal, where every one of you is a sovereign being, and every one of you has the right to decide for yourself by whom and how you will be governed. And that includes the capacity to say to these bastards up here, no more. Build the army, folks. We've got to build an army of Australians that aren't going to take it anymore, and we keep turning up. Now, we turned up on the first day 3 Saturdays ago, and it was bloody brilliant. It was the largest collection of people on a movement in Australian history. If we want this to end, we stay until we win. Now, if you can't stay during the week, that's fine. Go home, tend the animals, whatever you got to do. But every Saturday, we've got to get this crowd bigger and bigger and bigger. Because they want to screw with us on the 28th or the 29th. Well, it's got to be over before then. How does that sound to you? So building up every Saturday until the end of March, until they run with their tails between their legs. We know that if they just ended the mandates and the restrictions and everything else tomorrow, we know the mechanism that put them in place, that allowed that to happen, still exists, correct? So it's not enough just to end this, because they'll come back harder with more UN troops. Well, we can jail them. So the point's this. Ending the mandates and the rest is not enough. We know that. Now, there are many ways to do this. But the constitutional way, and this is what pisses them off royally, because we're not tearing down the barricades, we're not charging the buildings, we're doing this constitutionally. Now we know that the Governor-General, His Excellency General David Hurley, has the authority and responsibility to dissolve Parliament. Now mainstream media say things like, oh, that'll never happen. Yeah, and you won't end up on a gallows either, mate. And you've got other people saying it would be unprecedented. Well, that's true, but they better get used to some unprecedented actions by some unprecedented people in the few years coming next, because you people are going to stand up and fight for yourselves. Now, David Hurley has a job to do, and that's dissolve Parliament. Why? Because they've been acting unconstitutionally. You know this. If he warns them and they fail to change their ways, which they won't because they're puppets of the deep state and the Masonic filth, then Hurley has the responsibility and the authority to dissolve Parliament. Now, this is nothing new. Parliament is dissolved immediately before an election. So there's no fear factor here. It's just every election, the Governor-General dissolves Parliament. There is a caretaker mode where nothing happens until the next election. So this is quite normal, nothing unusual. Appoints an Executive Council, and we know this, the Executive Council, that's the constitutional language for what we call the Cabinet. Now the Cabinet and the Prime Minister, they're conventions. That's not actually part of the Constitution. This Executive Council, he can pick the best and brightest in the country, and they have 2 jobs to do. 1, get rid of all nonsense, every bit of it, open up the country. 2, clean up the electoral system so we can have the first free and fair elections in maybe 50, 60 years. At that election, we the people, for the first time in a long time, will have the ability to speak with our own voice, because we're not the silent majority, we're the silenced majority. But you will finally have the right to speak for yourselves. And when people say the people want this and the people want that, you can tell them to go to hell, and we can speak for ourselves. Thanks very much. So this election we have with a cleaned up electoral system is what we need. From there we can have a constitutional convention to tweak, reinvent, start from scratch how and by whom we'll be governed. Ladies and gentlemen, moments like this do not occur often in history. These are 300, 400, 500 years apart. This moment in history will never come again. Now, sidebar comment. There's a few young people here, 17, 18, 19, 20. I exhort you to write down, to record what you see, hear and feel at these rallies. Because in 50, 60, 70 years, everyone here will be dead but you. And you'll be the last living witness to this event, this seminal event in Australian history where the Australian people stood up and in one voice they said, this is our country, we run it our way. Yeah. So what we need is this. Hashtag, do your job Hurley. Do your job David Hurley. Let's the man who has the responsibility and the authority to defend us gone. You want the mandates gone, you want the QR codes gone, you want the face nappies gone, then that'll happen when Hurley sacks this Parliament and gives us a chance to speak for ourselves.